Let's talk VDML with KJR.
Hi, welcome guys. We've got David Smulders and Craig Bryden from BitQ with us today to join our VDML Talks podcast. And again, just a good chat about the opportunities with AI, and then how we should really approach it so we can move forward with confidence and manage risk. What's exciting, BitQ doing a lot in this space already. So we're here to have a chat with you guys about your experiences with customers and what's happening, particularly around, I think, the LLM space, with the emergence of the new tools that do like retrieval augmented generation. I think they're some of the tools that companies, particularly enterprise companies and government departments, are finding quite useful. So maybe kick off with you guys to have a bit of a chat about your experiences so far in this space. And who wants to kick off with that?
Well, Craig, go for it.
Thanks for having us, Kelvin. Look, we're finding customers are extremely interested, obviously. Everyone's interested in chat GPTs and what has been really interesting is traditionally government agencies lag sort of 5 years behind private sector when it comes to technology adoption, yet what we're finding is they seem to almost be leading the investigation into the feasibility of private generative AI solutions. Because government departments, there's a lot of repetitive work that, if that can be alleviated, will have a significant impact for them. That's sort of been one of the first things we've noticed is that they're sort of leading in that space, and then. But there's also a lot of concern, obviously, being government, they're probably a little bit more accountable than private sector organizations. And there's a lot of concern about, is it giving the right answer? What happens if it gives the wrong answer? So all the sort of ethical things around that is sort of where we're seeing some challenges.
Interesting. So look, AI and sort of, machine learning and deep learning's been around for a long time. Particularly through computer vision, but it seems to be this, generative AI and large language models has exploded. So why do you think, government are really, what's the driver there? They've seen that as the opportunity to sort of really start looking at this. What's sort of driving the value out of LLMs?
Yeah, I can give you my opinion. I think it's that they've been so stuck in the past, or been seen as an organization or that's been stuck in the past, and that this is something that makes sense to them. It's something that, because it's an opportunity, especially if you look from the conversations that we've had at very senior levels, at ministerial level and DG level, and that is they are so desperate for efficiency. They're so desperate to be different. They're so desperate to be able to add more value back to community and that. And this is something that makes sense to them. When you go and talk to a DG or somebody in a very senior position, about ITSM, or you go and tell them about a data warehouse or something like that, they sort of blank over. When you go and use, not really technical terms, but more like, well, what happens if we can create an automated library that you can talk to and it can give you efficient answers or help you with ministerial briefs? They actually go, that's what I need. I need to be more efficient. I need to be better than anybody else. So I think it's that's driving them, and you're talking a language where they understand the outcome very clearly.
So a really good use case that we're seeing coming out for government agencies is briefing notes. It's the bane of their existence. And if you think about what a briefing note is, it's taking a piece of official legislation or regulation or something like that and summarizing it down to half a page or a page. And large language models are extremely good at doing that.
That's right.
And so, the clients we've already worked with in this space, they've either been around efficient retrieval of data. So one example is not just a large language model, but they've actually hooked it up to a SQL database and it writes the query that somebody's asked and gives the answer back. Briefing notes, as I've mentioned, is a very common one. Another client we're currently talking to is looking to build an HR assistant because their HR team had 40% slashed overnight by a restructure, and they're looking for an assistant that'll just answer basic HR questions that they're currently having to field emails and phone calls about. That realistically, it's the same answer every time.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like people say, "Oh, I don't want HR, AI bot, evaluating my application." And you go, "Do you realise how applications are vetted at the moment? They get 150 applications, like they get like 20 seconds to do a quick keyword scan."
Yeah.
So if there was some more intelligent thing that would lift up, perhaps a thing that would easily be overlooked, I think there's value in that, right? It's so it's that adding value. But the other thing I guess I see a lot as well is the value of these tools and now being able to access a whole lot of data that they've got that it's always been so hard to work with structured data to sort of pull it out of different things and make sense of it, right? So I see a lot of value from that. Yeah, cool. Interesting you're saying government sort of are leading adopters. But then they're sort of, like you said, government tend to be risk averse. So where do they have a sort of a clear pathway on how they manage their risks?
Personally, I don't think there's a clear pathway because it's a problem they're struggling with. If you think about the briefing note scenario, I think it's fairly safe because a human still has to review it before they send it out. They'll never just take what it gives. Whereas HR assistant, so a person who's employed by that government agency asks about their entitlements. If it gives the wrong answer, they can be in real hot water. So I think it depends on the use case, and the use cases that can probably add them the most value have probably got the highest risk associated as well.
Yeah. And it's funny that, isn't it? Because I've seen other government departments get really excited. Oh, we're going to build a government chatbot to somebody can log in and ask any question they like, and really that's the first application you're going to start with. And I think, as you're pointing out, there's a lot more low-hanging fruit that is good business value, but probably a better way for them to start. So what's your advice when you start? Are you finding that initial conversation with government departments, trying to narrow down to where that value is, and what are the things to maybe hold off on until they've built capability?
We always talk about the aspects of clarity. So, and there's the age-old saying, just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean that you should be doing it. So, and there's two reasons for that. One, obviously, there's an ethical risk. So you don't want to just do something for the sake of doing it without being aware of what the consequences are. But then there's also the risk element. So when we talk to our clients and they say, oh, we want to do this, or we thought about doing this, or we thought about doing that, you sort of go and say, okay, well, it's an early adopter. I mean, there's nobody in the room who goes and says, oh, I've got 20 years experience in ChatGPT. You're going, well, it doesn't really exist, So you sort of say to the people, well, let's try and mitigate the risks as much as what we can. So let's build something that is ethical, that is trustworthy, but also that is got minimal risk for you for if and potentially when something does go wrong. So that's really the conversations that we do have. We've yet to be having conversations with them when they want to throw something out to the public. They're all looking at internal efficiencies. And the conversations that we're having, and I think if they feel comfortable enough in getting those internal efficiencies right, then they'll be more susceptible to going out.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, it's also that design of that process. It's not the technology on its own, but what's that process that sits within, right? And a bit like that example of saying, we're going to let a chatbot out to the public, and there's no human sort of scrutiny of the result versus something that is doing a ministerial release, and there's a human in the loop in that process, right? To sort of do that cross-check. I think that's a big factor. Cool. So what's the technologies that you've been working with in working with those customers and things like that?
Yeah, look, from our customers' point of view, it's been largely on the Microsoft Azure platform. So OpenAI on Azure is almost a common denominator across all our clients at the moment, but we are a Microsoft-focused organization. So that's what they've been using. As far as the actual user interface, we've custom built one. In another case, Microsoft's released an accelerator, so it's an open source project that they've got for it.
Is that the information assistant one?
Yeah. So that was our starting point, but then some heavy customization to that. Again, government, they've looked at that and they've gone, there's some serious things that have been left out from a scrutiny and governance point of view. So in almost all cases, we've had to bolt on a lot of additional security features to that. Guardrails, that sort of thing. But that's mostly what we've been using so far. We've built some things internally for our own proof of concepts that don't use that. But that's mainly been to prove to ourselves what we can offer to our customers.
And before we get into some more of that technology, in terms of the customer that you're dealing with, what's their knowledge? Do they have an understanding of what an LLM is doing, or do they sort of see it as this AI magic that's sort of happening? What's the level of journey that you've got to take that customer on to?
I think the customers are definitely divided. There's some of them that are clear and aware that AI is nothing new. AI has been around for many years, and it's the fact that it's simpler. It's a little bit easier to understand, and it's a little bit easier to control and manage. Whereas AI 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you didn't really know who had control. We've all seen the movie I, Robot. That was going to take over the world. That's not the case. And then there is the other group that goes, well, this is magic. And the danger of that is that they believe it's too magic. Oh, it can just quickly do this, or it can just quickly do, and it's that beautiful word, just quickly. Just quickly build something that can do this or do that or do that, and just ask AI, because it can code everything for you. I saw an article, and it sort of creates a bit of a diverse world. The problem is though that there's the third group, and then it's the third group that are completely zero trust. And that's probably more of the dangerous group, because the conversations we're having them is that if you don't adopt AI in your organization, your staff will. And that's more dangerous than having it in a controlled environment, or your good staff will leave.
That's right.
Because nobody wants to be in an environment where they're pushing pen and paper anymore.
No, I think I agree. You find that sort of different groups, and there's some stuff we were doing around being able to build a SQL query on a data lake for the medical thing, and make that available to clinical people to generate a query, and they would get a query, and you kind of go, well, you can break down your users, like you said, into three groups. There's going to be the group that puts it in and just believes everything that tool comes back with, and you go, that's dangerous. But then there's a group that they put it in and it didn't quite give the result, so they just write it off straight away. And then you get into really the happy medium, right, of going, okay, this is a tool that I can work with and collaborate with to sort of get the result I want, and trying to get people to that level. But I kind of feel like, and David, you were in that workshop we ran with other executives, it was really important. We had to get people on the page of a mental model around what these tools are capable of doing, what they're good at doing, like synthesizing information, a well-defined context, they can really quite a very powerful tool, right, compared to what we've seen in the past. But this is not going to do all this reasoning and all this other stuff for you that, again, just having that really understanding where the value provision is. Cool. So, okay, so we take the customers on this journey. In that workshop we had, David, before we go into that, the implementation that you've got, what's the risk profile there? Again, you're mainly building these retrieval augmented generation tools, like you're providing it information and context, so privacy would first of all be one of the big concerns, right, in that area. So how have you addressed that with your clients? Well,
with the technology stack we're having, we've implemented nothing's outside of their control, so it's all being built within their Azure tenancy, so they maintain control of the entire technology stack. So nothing ever leaves their tenancy, theoretically, and it's one of the beauties about that solution. there's some...
And that seems to be pretty standard for any corporation or government department, right? We are not going to use the external APIs. Everything's internal at the moment.
Yeah, interestingly, I had a conversation with a government agency this last week where they seem to think that they were okay with just using Microsoft's Copilot and throwing their documents in there.
Yep.
Although, our engineers disagree at the moment based on what they've read. You know, there's still stuff going out to America and that sort of thing.
And I have seen an example where a government department did use the external stuff, but it was complete public information, like summarising government gazette information and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's by and large how we're managing it at the moment, is because it's all in their tenancy. You know, Azure OpenAI is a service you stand up within your tenancy. Yeah. Excellent.
But it's also educating them. It's educating them on what to use for what.
Yeah.
You know, for example, if I'm going to be using, you know, our proposals and recreating new proposals for customers, I'm going to be doing that in a secure environment, or if I'm going to be analysing HR statistics or things like that. But if I'm not going to be asking Copilot to help me plan a trip to Japan. I'm going to be going to ChatGPT and saying, what are the funky places in Japan I should be going to?
That's right. Yeah.
You know, so it's educating yourself and saying, when should I use an open API or an open GPT so that I can get most value out of it?
Yep.
And then just hope that when you arrive at place X, you know, that it actually exists. But that also makes part of your journey a little bit fun, you know. It's that education, and like with anything, like with the internet or the phone or anything like that, is if you're not prepared to take a little bit of time and educate yourself, you're gonna stump your toe, and it's going to be hard.
Yeah. So when you start your implementation, like, it's so easy to get started with some of these tools, right? I can spin up an instance, and I've now got a model. Great. But how's your experience? Does that model work out of the box, or what's that process then they've got to go through?
Look, every client's use case has been slightly different, so it isn't just a plug-and-play model. 80% of the infrastructure can be spun up within a day or two. But it's then gluing it all together. And that's something that's going to improve massively, and all the big players are aware of that friction point. So we're already seeing advancements since we started this, a year and a half ago, to what we've got today compared to then is vastly different and so much easier to spin up and get going. But there's still, you know, a bit of putting the Lego blocks together for every client. But we are, within our team, seeing a lot more standardization happen now. So it is becoming pretty quick. We've built a template for our customers who just, you know, want to go on the sort of proof of concept journey. So we can stand up a proof of concept for them pretty quickly. Like when I say that, a week to two. For basic functionality. Anything that they want different obviously becomes customization.
And then how do they build up that understanding of what it actually is capable of doing and not doing? Like, what's that evaluation process that then you embark on?
Look, it's been slightly different for each client, but our most sophisticated client, who is a great use case or a case study for us, they've gone on a rigorous internal user acceptance testing process. So initially, once they got the technology working, they took 2 or 3 use cases they wanted to prove out, did up proper test cases, as you would hope. Then they got, while the developers were obviously testing those test cases as well, just to see what was happening, they would then get actual users involved who were experts, subject matter experts in those fields, and they would do a bunch of testing, and then once they were satisfied, then they would open it up to a larger test group who are now the potential users of the solution. And in that particular case, they were pretty clear what they needed out the back, so they had good test cases. They were clear with what the expected outcome was. So, and the one thing that was interesting is that, as you probably know, the way you prompt these engines is the real important thing. So they found in the early stages, when they hadn't done a lot of education with some of the users, and these people hadn't used ChatGPT very much at all, the kind of questions they were asking weren't getting the result because it was a bad question. So they actually built up a whole library of example questions that were surfaced in the user interface. So, you know, they would say, like, for instance, okay, I'm about to do a briefing, right? And the actual user interface would say, look, here's an example of a good question, of a good prompt.
Yeah.
So they came up with this library of prompts that they would give to them, and that way those people were educating themselves.
Yeah. And then it's that process, isn't it? Optimization about how you might feed that prompt context into the process, or add some pre-steps or some guardrails up front and so on. And then did you get into things like how refined retrieving context is, from like how it's searching documents and things like that? Was there much tuning?
Look, in that particular project there was a lot of tuning, because they're one of the first in their area to do this. And they were being watched by other government agencies to see how successful it was. So it was in their interest to not try and rush it and do it properly. So they had a, you know, it's a long-term project actually. They were very early adopters, and they were only going live around about now. So they've taken probably 8 months to, even though the technology was stood up within weeks, the project's been like 8 months to get to the point where they're going live in their business with it now. Yeah,
and it's almost like a yes minister sort of question, isn't it? Because there's really an absence of any sort of governance process that these public servants have to, so they're often reluctant to make a decision, right? Because of, there's not a lot of guidelines coming from government about like what is it. Regulation's still emerging, so it's really important, these initial trials where they identify the low risk areas to really build capability and understanding, right? So they, because I think the natural tendency of government people, I spin up a POC, but I'll never push this live because I'm not going to be the culprit to sign off individually that this is ready to go, right? So they sort of need those governance guardrails in place as well. So where do you think things are heading with government on that? Was there much guidance from government? I know Queensland government put out some sort of policy on generative AI, but it's very high level, wasn't it?
I believe there's a refined one coming within Queensland government soon. And then there's going to be a third version, I believe, by January next year. So they put out something quickly, and now they're going through refining it. So I think there is concern. So as an example, the one that's looking at an HR assistant, there is significant concern around that, because again, you know, the briefing note example, you know, you take 10 subject matter experts who all know their area. They test the system. They say it's giving good answers. You can be fairly confident, right? Because a briefing note's a briefing note. Whereas having all your HR policies and having hundreds of internal staff who can potentially ask any question of that and potentially get the wrong answer, and then that becomes a significant issue.
Because the interesting thing there is, you know, they might be accused of some sort of bias. But, you know, interestingly with the tools, that they might actually be less biased than the humans doing the current process, right? But now they're measurable and they're almost repeatable, so you're open much more up to some sort of action, you know, discrimination, right, of that, because of that sort of automation that we've put in place. It's almost like, you know, it might be a better solution, but, you know, the perfection's the enemy of the good sort of thing, right? So with David, you know, in that workshop we held with other sort of C-suite people, who obviously people are coming to them with these POCs, but they sort of don't know which way to head. What would be your recommendation to those guys about how to get started? But maybe some of what's the gaps in their team capability and how they assure things differently from traditional systems?
Interestingly, we had a very large client that we had a workshop with yesterday around, you know, choosing a POC for you know, their AI platforms and that going forward, and it was really good because the discussions came around just a couple of basic questions. Asking your staff, first of all, what do you do on a day-to-day basis that's ongoing, that's repetitive, that's mundane, that's brain numbing kind of work. What are the harder challenges? What are the time consuming challenges? You know, and if you start really defining those definitions in a business, and I think it's going to force us as CEOs and company owners and that, and government leaders and that, to really start defining operationally what do we do on a day-to-day basis, and who does that, and how long does that take? And that's where I think we're going to see phenomenal enhancements in AI. You know, this whole thing, and it's still, you hear it on a day-to-day basis, oh, I don't want this AI, it's going to take my job. And you're going, well, if you don't, somebody who does do it is going to take your job.
Yeah.
And you kind of go and say, well, it's not about taking jobs. It's about helping you be more efficient and more effective at what you do. Yeah. So I think that being clear, because even in our own businesses, you know, you can go and ask a 3-man business, define your operations, define your processes, define what you do, and we won't know.
Yeah.
So can you imagine somebody with 8,000 employees asking the CEO, what's the priorities? They'll go, oh, I don't know. Are we talking top down? Are we talking bottom up? And that's a really good conversation that we're having with customers.
Yeah, cool. So traditionally, like when you're rolling this application out, you've got like a project sponsor, like some C-suite person or some senior responsible officer. I mean, around this technology, who are they turning to in the sort of governance and technology space to help them make those decisions? Because there's probably not a lot of expertise in their own team, right? And how things are changing on that side.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'm fortunate or not fortunate to be part of 4 different states in terms of high-level discussions with government around policy and governance and that, because it's one of the major challenges that I experience is, you know, New South Wales are always first. You know, they're always first to launch a new policy or come up with a new thing like that. And a lot of the corporates tend to follow what they're doing because they sort of go and say, okay, you know, they're the early adopters.
Let's policy and we follow
100%. The challenge with that is that if they get it wrong, you know, it sends everybody down a wobbly road, and that may or may not have happened in the past. So the real question now is, I think for the first time, CEOs are being open and honest and going and saying, I don't know the answer. I don't know where to go to. And rather than just going to the old trusted advisor, they're actually going to multiple. They're actually going to people and saying, we don't want a jack of all trades anymore. We actually want somebody who's a specialist in this area. We're looking for somebody who knows what they're talking about, who's done 1 project. We don't care. We've done 3 projects. We don't care. Just talk to us about somebody who's done something. And I think it's actually got a huge benefit for us because I feel organizations are being more open to trialing new things, but they're getting there, they're asking the right questions, or they're asking better questions. And that is going to go a long way in helping us improve or enhance how we deliver these options forward and safely.
Excellent. So look, you know, you guys have got that early experience of the POCs and things like that. Some of them are, you know, being implemented probably on the lower risk area. Others are going to take a bit more time, but is this just the tip of the iceberg for where LLMs are going to fit in, do you think? Or
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, we've got I'd like to think the most intelligent data scientist in the world, but probably not. We've got an incredible data scientist. And if you really have nothing to do for the rest of the day, ask him a question at 8 o'clock about what do you think LLMs can do? Because he'll keep you busy for the next 12 hours. And it's really great because, you know, he's not bragging. He's genuinely excited. And I don't know anybody who, and I may be speaking wrong, so forget me wrong, but I don't know anybody who got overly excited implementing a CRM or an ERP or a data lake or something like that. You know, they loved what they do, and building a really nice dashboard or implementing a new CRM is really exciting, but I've never seen this level of excitement, both from customers as to what is this going to give me, but from the technical guys. You know, they are so excited about how they can actually enhance lives, how they can actually make a difference.
No, I think it's given a level of value add that we've never seen before. You know, if we think about, our structured data and our, you know, ERP systems and things like that.
Yeah.
It's hard to get excited about a dashboard or something like that, right? But now you go, holy dooly, this can sort of like automate or semi-automate workflow. Again, you know, super important to incorporate, you know, humans in the loop in many of those aspects. But you can see how, you know, there's a lot of value can be added.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exciting times ahead, hey? It's,
Indeed.
well, thanks very much for joining our VDML talks, and yeah, look forward to maybe having a bit more of a follow-up on some specific things down the track as well.
Thanks for including us. Love it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, cool.